Rangers Journal now.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Journal. My name is Doug, and you're here for another live show talking about all things Rangers, which is not the easiest thing to do at this exact moment in time, but we are here to keep doing it for you guys nonetheless. I'm here with a couple of great panelists. We've got Scott joining us. Hello, Scott. How are you this evening?
I'm not bad, Doug. Nice to be on, nice to be asked to come on again, so I quite enjoy it, and it's something different. And I know you said it's not nice talking about Rangers, but at least we're not talking about just what's happened, we're talking about a few things in the past as well, so it's better that way, and it gives us something. Listen, I like to talk about Rangers all the time, no matter if it's good or bad, so I'm looking forward to it.
And down there, the handsome man of the Rangers Journal is Dino. How are you getting on, Dino?
I'm good, thank you, Doug. How are you getting on, pal?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Looking forward to a conversation. Looking forward to talking to you guys. Maybe not the subject matter itself. We should also have Mitch join us at some point as well. He's got to address his weans first of all, but he's hopefully going to be joining us at some point as well. Welcome to the guys who are popping in at the chat there. Got Dado. Evening, Dado. How are you getting on? And Gordon, good evening. Not Another Rangers podcast. And the Podmaster General himself, Scotty. Welcome all you guys in the comments. Do chime in with your comments throughout the evening. We'll get them up as well as we're chatting through. You've obviously seen the title. We are talking about 5 games that we've highlighted that sort of tell the story of Philippe Clement and his time at Rangers and how that time is coming to a swift end, or at least many in the fan base now hope that it is. Scott, if I start with yourself, just in kind of general, so I make the assumption now that the vast majority of Rangers fans are now in the sort of the Clement out bandwagon. Is that where you are, or do you see any hope for him at this point?
I think it's when past that point, it's kind of toxic. I think there's going to be a back for Clement. The league's over. We're not going to win a cup domestically, and I'm not being a defeated here, but I don't think we'll win the Europa League either. We maybe get through the next round, but I don't think we'll win it. So I think, listen, Clement's one of the biggest issues at the club. There's a lot of other issues there, but I think you have to deal with him first, and I think we have to maybe tell him enough's enough. We pay him off. Do we get somebody in straight away? I don't know, but we need to bring somebody in until the end of the season and then see where we can go. Because as long as he's there, as soon as we lose our next match, it's going to be exactly the same. If we get beat with Saturday with Hearts, it's going to get worse. So I think it's come to that point where he's probably not enjoying it, and I don't think we're enjoying it. So I think it's time to say thanks, but see you later.
Absolutely. See a wee comment there for Dado. He's done his back end. Perhaps he's been carrying Rangers as best he can during this time. I hope you feel better soon, Dado. Dino, coming to yourself, how are you in terms of your viewpoint on Clement? Where are you sitting?
Want him out the door. Wanted him out the door for a prolonged period of time now, far too long to remember, for a multitude of reasons that I'm sure that we'll get into. But he could win the Europa League, spank Man United in the final, and I'd still want him gone. Simple as that. So yeah, sooner he's gone, the better. And we can only hope that the board make the right decision with his replacement.
Indeed, and speaking of replacements, that segues me quite nicely into highlighting we've got a video also out tonight on the similar theme of the future of the management of Rangers from Scotty and the Coppin report lads. Having a look at, as I say, some potential managers. You can find that both on our channel and indeed on the Heart and Hand network as well. Patreon.com Heart and Hand. I'm sure everyone will be aware of them, and as I say, we've been lucky enough to do some work with them, and this video is one of them. So you can either listen to that over on the Heart and Hand channel if you're over there at any point, and as I say, it's also been uploaded on our channel as well. Okay, so I had a comment just up there from Peter, and she says, let's blame the manager, not the fact that he has his hands tied behind his back. So that kind of segues in a little bit to the first section of what I wanted to talk about. And I'll bring Mitch in as well as he comes in to join us at this point. We've picked out 5 games. As I say, I've picked out 5 games that I think sort of highlight, as I say, the narrative. So the first one that we're going to talk about is right back at the beginning of the season, Dynamo Kiev, the second leg where we lost 2-0. So I've called this sort of first blood, but with caveats. So Peter's mentioned there the fact that he had his hands tied behind his back. This was the kind of the first sign of trouble. I think this game showed some of the things that we would begin to see become repeat offences, if you like, in terms of kind of a little bit static and attacking play, creating chances but not getting goals. But at the same time, at that point, we were able to say, well, the club hadn't really brought a lot of new players in yet to back the manager. There was an unfortunate sending off. That's something that we've talked about in our group chat a lot, in terms of how refereeing decisions have swayed certain games that haven't gone our way as well, and that's a factor to bring in. So touching on this first one, I was going to swing to Mitch, but he seems to have got. Oh no, he's back.
I was here. I was just getting something for someone.
So, Mitch, if I come to you first of all, you can say hello to everyone, and then just sort of chat about your memories of that game, and did you find that an early warning sign at all, or at that point was it still just sort of, let's say, early days and teething problems?
I would say very early days, teething problems, and a mixture of, let's just say, half the ingredients were there to bake a cake, but the cake had forgot to get put in the oven. If you were asking me there, I think the Kiev game, when you take that to the side and you say it was early in the season, we didn't really know what was going on at the time there. Obviously, players who was staying, who was going. We weren't even playing at Ibrox either. I think that's the one that I would say probably gets a wee bit of a let slide on that one. And in all honesty, the Champions League, yes, it would have been amazing. But if we're being honest here, we probably would have got our pants pulled down within the first couple of games, and it's not the level that this particular squad are ready to be in right now. I would much sooner see us take a deep dive into the Europa League, which is the level that this squad is at, and do well there, as opposed to, nobody wants, PTSD from Liverpool again.
It's interesting. We'll come to you, Scott, on one of the points Mitch made there about the Champions League. How do we look at the way that panned out in terms of what happened after that round that we went out of? Had we gone through, Kiev faced Red Bull Salzburg to get the qualification in the Champions League. Kiev ultimately ending up themselves also in the Europa League. Interesting enough, they finished almost at the bottom of the sort of mega group stage, although they did have quite a few difficult teams to play. And then I had a look at Salzburg, and Salzburg, they played a couple of teams in the Champions League that we faced before and have beaten, but they did also face some of the big hitters. I think they played Real Madrid and a couple of big guys there. How do you think the team would have fared had we got into the Champions League? And did you find yourself annoyed more so that we failed to beat Kiev, seeing how they ended up performing in the Europa League as a whole?
Probably, yeah. I mean, Kiev, really, I don't think they were a good side at all. I thought they were beatable. I thought we should have beaten them. I thought we had our chances, never took them, and we conceded 2 bad goals. But I think at that stage, when you get to the Champions League, first of all, we know we're not going to do really good. I mean, we're not going to be near and win it, but it's about getting some finance in the door, and it gets you more money than the Europa League does. Yes, Europa League is our kind of level, but I don't want to always win a competition where when you play double the games, you're still getting less money than you do playing 3 or 4 games in the Champions League, because that gives you a lot more money to spend on your squad and what to do other stuff with. So the Champions League is the one you want to win. Unfortunately, never. And I said, so you always do well, And I don't think Salzburg were a great side either. I thought we performed really well in European away games and at Ibrox this season. So you never know what would have happened. It's just, I think the Kiev game, I don't say it was too early. I just think we weren't good enough on the night, because away from home we were okay. And these things happen, but like Matt said, you said early doors. I would probably say the door was probably open by that time because the end of last season we were poor, and I think that was just to start what we were going to see. But I think that extra finance, it could have helped. You don't know what it'd have done, but it could have helped because we didn't spend that much, but it could have helped maybe bringing one or two more in. But we can't keep looking back, can we?
Aye, and do you know, on that point, where do you sit between, obviously, Champions League, it's where the money is. The difference, as Scott said there, is absolutely huge between what they're earning playing in the Champions League and likely to go out at the round that they're in. And yeah, we could perceivably go 2-3 or games more, and we'll get nowhere near. But you've got the memories that come with some great games. We've had some amazing nights, obviously in the Europa League. Where do you sit between that sort of difficult decision of we really need the money, but the memories that you can get in these games are priceless?
Where I sit with it all, I was actually content to sacrifice qualification for the Champions League if it meant we were going to progress domestically. Those nights at Ibrox playing in Europe haven't won us anything. So first and foremost, I want us to start doing this at the end of every season. And I would have happily sacrificed the Champions League. You know, I'd be like, okay, I would accept we should have beat Kiev for the reasons the lads have alluded to. But the grand scheme of things, I want us to be winning domestically. And yeah, so qualification for the Europa League, that's fine. It was kind of what everybody was actually probably, it was almost like a prerequisite, wasn't it, when we were going to be qualifying for the Champions League. The majority of us were already like, well, we probably won't even make it, let's be honest. We'll make the Europa League, however. Do you know, so that was a general consensus amongst quite a lot of the support. So in terms of us Europa League and, you know, getting far into it, that's probably something that that we'll probably end up doing, knowing Rangers.
Absolutely. Mitch, one of the things I think is important about the Europa League and the fact that we are able to perform well and sort of get further in it, although it doesn't earn us money, I think that it, particularly in the past and continues to be so, it's a really good thing in terms of the PR of the club, in terms of appealing to players. Players are more likely to know who we are because we're performing well in Europe. They're more likely to maybe come despite the fact we play in Scotland because we've got all these really good games, particularly the home games where the atmosphere is known. We're obviously, I think the last 2 years in a row we've won, I think it's 442 magazine's best stadium in the UK. That, and those type of like media stories and that paint the club in a good light competitively on a European stage will help bring in better players. Which then obviously will hopefully then contribute to what Dino's saying, which is winning the bread and butter in terms of winning the league, winning our home trophies. How do you kind of view that relationship? Do you think that's important? Do you think it's not that important and that it should just be Europe is doesn't matter, focus on the league? Or how do you think that balance needs to be sat for the club?
I don't think there should be a balance. As we've got a pedigree historically as a club that domestic expectations are just as important as European expectations. I do still think, and I stand by the point about, Europa League. I'd much sooner take an impressive deep dive in the Europa League where we are competitive. We are not playing in the money league right now. Yes, okay, we can make more money in the Europa League group stages, but how much more of a hindrance do you make in young players' careers by giving them the Leon King scar tissue of Liverpool, those nights in Liverpool? Would I sooner see us playing in, the Champions League next season? I think that might be impossible now, obviously, with the whole coefficient side of it, but that's for people that like spreadsheets, know me, like to figure out. But, get your wee ring light on, son. You're looking awfully dark there. Or either that, you've been in the sunbeds again. But the way I look at that is, I think deep dives in the Europa League are important, as you say, for player attraction, especially under the new model, where we're giving young players the signal to say, come here. Yes, we are going to be a stepping stone club, and none of the four of us want to say the quiet bit out loud. We are a stepping stone club for players that we're going to bring you in for £1, £2, maybe £4 million. Don't laugh at Cortez, Like, we're going to bring these youngsters in though for that sort of money. Perform well in the Europa League, perform well domestically. Voila, you're going to get your move to a top 5 Euro League if that's what the heart desires. And you're going to give us a nice 18 months to 2 years here. We're going to turn a nice profit. You go up the road and say thanks very much. And bring on the next one for the conveyor belt until we sort out those, the previous financial problems that we've had there, obviously, of our own doing by reckless recruitment, poor stadium choices, in terms of poor stadium build choices, and everything else. There is literally the better part of 6 years worth of a mess to get cleaned up right now. But also the stature of the club is equally as important, which is why being in the more competitive Europa League makes much more sense right now. Financially, Champions League would be amazing, but to attract those young players that we want to bring in as part of the player transfer model, I do not want to see young 22, 23-year-old boys like Yefty, for example, getting his trousers pulled down by the likes of Real Madrid. That hinders his development, it lowers his transfer value, and it makes us as a club look in absolute shambles. And that's my 2 cents on it.
Can I just say something quickly, please?
Yeah,
Go on
yeah.
then, son. I'm waiting for you. Come on.
Well, I mean, the guy at the weekend pulled Jeffrey's pants down with that goal, and he played for Queen's Park. So that transfer value was dropped on Sunday, mate. So we didn't need Real Madrid to do that to him, is my point.
I think in all honesty, mate, like when you take Sunday, right, and I have to put that in box A because like it's part of the overall murder scene at this point, but we put that in box A in the corner. That one game in particular doesn't really impact Yefty's transfer value. The games against Spurs, for example, where he played very well, that does impact his transfer model. Most people outside of the Scottish bubble do not give a flying hoot about Sunday's result. What they look at is how are these young players faring in Europe, and that's what inflates the transfer value. Bear in mind, on Sunday, if we're all honest about it, and I think my match ratings kind of, pretty much summed up my feelings on that. Don't think anybody got above a 2 if they were lucky, I think genuinely though, games like Sunday, they will also happen when you have youngsters in the team. Should it happen? Absolutely not. There is a part and parcel blame on the players, regardless of if they are new in the door and they are young, right down to your experienced head, like your experienced heads at the back, like Liam Kelly, like Tav. These players have been there and they've been around the block, whether that be at our club, in Tav's case, or whether that be elsewhere, like Motherwell and Liam Kelly's case. These are players that have been around the block. They should know how to guide youngsters through a game like that. And the in-game management by both Clement and the players was absolutely hanging on Sunday. And that's, I had to get that off my chest. See, Douglas, what have you done letting Dean speak to me? What have you done? Now go and get your ring light on, Dean, because your fake tan's coming through.
Okay, so bringing it back to the domestic games, the second match filled out here is the first Old Firm game. So the away match to Celtic, which we lost 3-0. The reason I've pulled this one out is at the end of last season, I thought when we played Celtic in the Cup, it felt like to me, despite the fact that we ultimately lost the game, that Clement had made some ground. The team played much better. We had a much better control of the midfield. We seemed to adjust the team ever so slightly and played with a bit more of a flat three. It wasn't a full flat three, but a bit more of a flat three. And we really had a much better control of the midfield. And we were much more in that game than we'd been in games previous. And I was sitting there at that point going, okay, we've still lost, but we've gained ground. And that's something that we talk about a lot when someone's rebuilding a team or growing a team, is that you need to see signs of progress. So that day I was saying to myself, okay, there's signs of progress, good. So when we came into this game, I was feeling quite positive in that, right, we did well last time, let's see us develop it again. But then in this, he reverted back to what he'd been doing in the first sort of 4 or so Old Firms that he had, and we were just totally overrun. Celtic, multiple times in that game, just waltzed through the middle of the park, in particular for Kyogo's goal, where he just has the entire centre of the pitch to himself, and Butland also gives him half the goal to himself as well. And so for me, this was a defining match because I was sitting there going, well, he's learned a lesson, and yet he seems to have ignored it. And this has happened, I feel, again and again in the time since then also, where the big one that most people touch on is playing with a second striker. Even if he's not actually a second striker, if he's playing off the left or playing in that 10 role, like we do sometime with Egaman, and we did with Danilo, we had success with that. Yet he seems to keep going back to playing just the one, usually Dessers, and then we struggle again, and that's a concern for me. So we're bringing it to you, Scott. How did you feel after that first game, that first Old Firm match, and in terms of the sort of the idea there of repeating the same mistakes? Is that something you've seen from Clement's team as well?
Not just Clement's team. I think I've seen it for the past few managers as well, especially against Celtic. Obviously, Gerrard was different, but we only won one title under Gerrard, so you can't really put too much plaudits in that either. I think when it comes to playing Celtic, I think the players, some of the players look at it as a one-off. They maybe up their game, as you've seen recently. But when you look back to playing other teams, they revert back to what they do all the time. I think the manager's probably the same. I know you mentioned the two up front. I think he came across that because of injuries, and he had to do it. I don't think he wants to do it. You see him come back in with playing Barami, with playing Hadji, Cherney. Everything's too slow, far too slow. And playing one up top, it's too slow. When you play, I still think when you're playing Danilo behind Egaman, it's better than playing Egaman behind Dessers. But that's just my preferred opinion. I just think Danilo suits that role better, sitting behind Egaman. But I think for midfield forward, we're very, very slow. We stagnate quite a lot. We pass side to side. We don't. Apart from Cherney, who's probably been, since he's come in, our best player, he still divides fans as well because he's a winger, so he can be inconsistent. Most wingers are. But he's been involved in a lot of what we've done since he came through the door. Might have had a very slow start when he get abused against Kiev and stuff like that, but he seems to be getting better. But I think we still slow the game down too much. It's not for our own benefit. It seems to be for the opposition's benefit. But against Celtic that day, I wasn't expecting much, Doug. I don't expect much now when we go to Celtic Park because usually by half time the game's over. And it was again, do you know what I mean? So, and after that day, I thought we're not going to do anything this season domestically because we're very timid. We hide. We don't really have any fight when we do go a goal down. And it's been proven a lot of this season against various teams. Their goals against Celtic were very, very poor. I mean, we're giving people too much time. The ball down. Tav gets a lot of stick, right? He does the ball down the side there with the players running by him. Happens to Jeff all the time. Happens to him constantly, ball down the side. I know he's get pace, but it happens to him constantly all the time. So it's not just one fullback, it's the both. And that was Popper's first game. Popper was sliding in the park more than he was actually trying to defend. He's got a bit better where he's staying his feet more, but he still lacks a bit of pace, and so does Suter next to him. And that's what I mean, through the middle, defence, midfield and forward, we've not a team who's got a lot of pace or a lot of height. And I think with Scottish football, you need that domestically. European football can get away with more because we're usually sitting and hitting teams in transition and it might work. Whereas in Scotland, we've got the ball. A lot of times we don't really know what to do and we try to break a low block. Against Celtic, they don't have the low block, they come to us. But when we try to attack them, they hit us with pace. Maeda, people slag Maeda off. I would have him in our team every day a week because I think he's better than anybody we've got wide. He's direct, he knows where the goal is and he creates chances. Domestically, he's really, really good. So there's a lot to do. Yeah, the players have got a lot of blame. But I think the manager has to realise some formations and some tactics don't work against certain teams. And I think he may have, I'm not saying figured Celtic out, we lost the cup final with a shocking decision and we beat them 3-0. But we've been beating Motherwell, St Mirren and Hibs draw up there. It's no great, so I think there's a lot to work on for the manager. That's why I do think he deserves to not be here. But I think you've seen that day how the players, especially the players who've already got the battle scars, as soon as Celtic go ahead and then the crowd starts up, they hide away. They don't want to be involved.
Yeah, and one of the things that Scott mentioned there was about sort of injuries and changes to the team. One of the things that I've brought up here is the lineups that faced 4 of the 5. Could only fit the 4 in at a decent size, so I didn't bother including the most recent one. But I put in the teams that faced the 4 of these games that we're looking at. And one thing that does come out is that there's very little consistency. And obviously, it is spread along a large amount of time, so it's not necessarily the best, but it does show very little consistency. Formation is largely the same, other than for the Celtic game. But the only player that's in the same position every single time is Tavernier, who's at right back. You could argue Barron is playing sort of centre mid in all of them, but he does sort of shuffle in terms of which side he's on and who he's with. So there's a little bit of change there. But other than that, everything else changes. And some of that's due to injuries, players being in and out the team. And then obviously the adjustments to selection. Do you think that that's something that's been a valid excuse for Clement in terms of injuries? He made a big point about it, obviously, at the beginning of the season, that he wanted to improve that, but it doesn't seem to have gotten hugely better. I do think it has improved slightly, but we have still suffered regular injuries to key players. Is that something that is a valid excuse for some of the issues he's faced?
No, simple as that. Managers all throughout football have injury problems, personnel problems, suspensions. Look, and all I hear that comes out of his mouth is excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. And you're saying lacking consistency. How many games does he make changes at half time because he's gotten it wrong? Right? So I'm sorry, but his excuses hold no weight for me anymore. Your manager at Rangers, the resources you have at your disposal, you should just toughen up. Just get on with it. Simple as that. If injuries, we know that. But you've got resources there that other clubs in Scotland can only dream about. So just get up and get on with it and stop. And I mean, have you ever once seen him take accountability for anything? I can't recall. Do you know what I mean? So no, his excuses are absolutely, they hold no weight, as I say.
Okay, and coming to you, Mitch. Obviously, Dino say he's got no time for excuses for Clement. Do you think that any of injury issues or anything else, at this point that we've got to now, do you think there's any valid things that Clement, and I think Dino does have a point that Clement, he often goes to his stats when he's under pressure. He doesn't often try to lean on things like injuries much, but is that something he could be saying, the fact that he's had a lot of injuries or that his team changes? The left attacking mid in particular, I think, is an area that he's had to play defenders and things like that. Is that valid for you?
I think I'm going to word this very carefully. One, so that we don't get clipped, and two, so I don't swear. So I think this season in particular, and I've mentioned this previously, it was always a transition season. Like, nobody wanted to say the quiet part out loud from the board. And actually, if somebody from board level just grew a set and came out and said at the start of the summer, look, here is the game plan. We are going to gut from the inside, outside. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be nice. We're in the trenches. This is what we have to do to make the club sustainable. And eventually, Patrick Stewart, when he came in, he said the quiet bit out loud, basically, of the finances up to this point are absolutely hanging. The results show us that the results are absolutely hanging. And in the summer, we had 18 out, 11 in. In January, we had maybe and I take the youth players to the side, but of the first team squad, we had roughly maybe 3 or 4 out. We had Kieran Dowell go, we had Rabi go, and I think we've also had maybe 1 or 2 others go. Might be wrong there. But then we've also lost players like Casemiro through injury. We've got Leon Balogun held together by thoughts and prayers, because, again, I'm done with the over 35-year-old defenders. Anyone that wants to defend Big Balogun, sorry, I'm not even interested in the argument. But injuries do play a part in that, and all the players that have left haven't been replaced by players of equal and or better quality. So what the manager's now been left with, even when you look at games like Sunday, and again, I am not excusing Sunday's result, because when you are Rangers, you should be able to field the kids out and go and beat Queen's Park. You know, no disrespect to them, but that is the disparity in finances and levels between the two clubs. But when you then look at the bench options and you go, you know, even starting on Sunday, Bailey Rice with give or take about 5 first-team appearances. We had, you know, we had Fernandez making his debut for the first proper debut for the club, first start. We had the 7th or 8th different variation of a backline in the last 2 or 3 months. But then when you also then look at the bench options, there's next to no experience sitting in that bench right now. The manager's been left with the best of the rest, plus Waynes. So you can't then, we shouldn't have been in the position of needing to make changes at half time on Sunday. But equally, when you look at the bench, you go, well, who's really there to bring on? We had Ridvan, who's been out for a couple of weeks, obviously, with the niggles there, obviously, after coming back for that last injury. And I don't think that was a big major one. But you go, well, we've got Ridvan, but he was having to play in the left wing because, again, we don't have a functional left winger at the moment. That should have been addressed in the window. And that's also on the board for not addressing that in the window. You know, when I understand why Fernandez was brought in, because realistically, Balogun's probably not going to be here after the summer. And there's probably one or two others in the back line that also won't be here past the summer. Names to be determined. But you would assume there's going to be some fresher changes. But Fernandez was brought in at the right time and he was the right player. But now when you start to see the likes of Sterling returning, Ridvan returning, Souters now returning, did we really need a defender, or did we actually need a winger?
I'll take a very rare position and slightly defend the board. So apparently we were in contention to sign a winger, and he would have come had the team that we were signing him from apparently were wanting someone out the door first, and that transfer didn't happen, which their first stop does. So they at least made an attempt, which
Let me throw that back at you, though.
it's not excusing them because they should have had their own backups. But they did at least have that on their mind in terms of the winger aspect.
I'm interested in buying a Ferrari, but if I can't afford one just now, then I'll go out and buy a Corsa. That's what we do at the end of the season to make sure that the squad was acceptable between now and the end of the season. Yes, plan A was to bring this boy in from elsewhere, but to not then proceed to go after the other alternative, you would assume 2 or 3 targets, because we'd left it so bloody late in the window to do anything. That's not acceptable, and that's on the board. That is, the manager doesn't control purse strings. He doesn't control negotiations with other clubs about bringing bodies in. But he also told the board, even the week before the window shut, I need additional players. And when you look at what is left between, you know, like Cora Barron being out at the moment, Sterling being out, and others that are currently still out, it's a shambles what he's got to play with at the moment. We've got about 700 defenders, but 3 midfielders, half the squad haven't had their first shave yet, and we're still so imbalanced at the moment that we know that that's going to take a proper summer window to deal with. Like, that is going to take this summer window. There's nobody else really left to go out, minus maybe 1 or 2 sellable assets.
On that point, then, just to play devil's advocate, knowing that the season's pretty much gone, apart from Europe, where obviously we can try and do something to our best there, is it good? Is it more beneficial in the kind of sort of more medium to long term to go out and get this player that we don't really want, but we just need to fill a space, or do we just say, right, we're just going to leave it, and we'll use our youth players, promote the youth players, play them instead, and give them the minutes, and then, like you say there, use the summer to sort it properly and get either whoever the first target was or another, first target, rather than settling for someone, particularly at a point where ultimately is it going to make that much of a difference?
So let me then throw that straight back at you. does that then not mean that the board should then come out and tell us at the start or midway through the January window, this is what the plan is? We're bleeding the youth in. There are going to be other bodies from the first team that leave. That is the nature of the beast right now. This comes back to the lack of transparency and the lack of communications from the top. And that's the bit that's sticking me to the back teeth this season. Should we have addressed
I think we
that
could make a whole pod about that on its own, to be honest.
And I think should we do the patchwork job of getting one or two bodies in? Yes, because there are still standards of the club to be maintained. And if we are sitting there going just now, we sold, like Rabbi's went off on loan, and to be fair, is he much of a miss given the game time that he's had this season? Not particularly. But we've also, then you look at the Cortez situation. He's also nursing his way back from a long-term injury, and realistically, we want to get him as strong as possible for next season because we know he's coming here next season. That's fine. But the lack of transparency and the lack of communication, and it's to a certain level, it feels like a degree of contempt from the board. Not to just sit here and talk to us properly as paying punters, but just explain, look, this is where we are. We've trimmed the wage bill by, rumours vary, but around about £12 million a year we've trimmed the wage bill by. You can't expect performances in the pitch to stay the same when you've raided the cupboard, sold everything, but you've left the foundations of the house. Be interested to hear Scott's thought on that.
I just like to say the board don't have to tell us anything. At the end of the day, they don't. No many football boards come out and tell you the truth. They give you clippets, they give you quotes, don't really tell you what's going behind the scenes because they don't want you to know. At the end of the day, they don't really want you to know what's happening. Also, I don't think with the players missing, I don't think we're any worse anyway than we were last season. I think we're very, very similar to the way we're performing. And I think with better players, I don't think Clement gets the best out of him because I don't think he's a man to take Rangers forward. But like I said, I think there's bigger issues at the club. Like you said, I think there's a lot of bigger issues, and they're trying to sort them out with the wage bill coming down and other things. And I was quite happy with not bringing anybody in, to be honest with you, because if you carry Blood, Rice, Curtis, I know Lovelace has left as well, but guys like that, putting domestically to see if they're good enough to save you money and maybe make you money, when are you going to blood them? You may as well not have an academy, because if you can't blood them now when the leagues are dead rubber, when are they going to play? And if taking Bailey Rice off after him against Queen's Park and throwing the lad under the bus, that's what I felt like was poor, because it wasn't Bailey Rice's fault we were drawing nothing each. That squad against Queen's Park was good enough to beat them. That squad we've got now is probably good enough to beat every team in the league, maybe bar Celtic, but we have beaten them because there is a nucleus of good players there. It's just how the manager's getting the best out of them, which isn't great because some of them do look lost and some of them do look like they don't know what they're doing. So I just feel the board should tell us more, but I'd never expect them to because that's just football people in general. The manager, I feel we need to change, but who do we get in? I don't know. Do we go foreign? I wouldn't myself. I'll go for a British manager because domestically I want to do more. I know that's just my opinion. Everybody likes to do European stuff, but we're getting. We mentioned European stuff earlier when you're saying, if you do well in Europe, you can sell players. We've done well in Europe the last 4 or 5 seasons. We've not really sold anybody. We got to Europa League final and not sold anybody because we were either knocking back the offers or running people's contracts down. Whereas Celtic haven't done well in Europe recently, but they're still selling guys for 10 million, 15 million because they're winning the league and trebles and stuff like that. So I think you can look at either side of that line. So I think we have to be careful. We have to be clever in the future because we've not got a lot of money. But I think it's going to be a slow journey, to be honest with you. But I would rather the journey started domestically getting better and maybe looking for a European trophy because I don't think that's out there. I think that's further from our reach now and it was when we got to the final under Gio.
Yep. Do you know, on a point that Scott's made there about, like, you know, Scott said he doesn't think that Clement gets the best out of the team. The next game that I've picked out for our 5 was the away game to Aberdeen, where Aberdeen won 2-1. And I picked this out because, to me, it's an example of winnable challenges that we've failed, which again is something, Celtic is the obvious one, but I felt, this was really built up. It was a really big game. Aberdeen obviously had an absolute flyer to the start of the season. They were undefeated, equal on points with Celtic. We dipped a bit, and so this was a big match where we could show, okay, no, we're not going to let you run away with it. We're not allowing ourselves to slip to a potential third place, and we failed to win that challenge. It was a game that Aberdeen just looked absolutely more up for. They were hungry. They were battling at everything. And although I don't think we played terribly, as I say, it was just an example of a game that, that I feel like we could have gotten more out of the team, and a game that we could have and should have won. What are your memories from that game, and your thoughts on, how will a new manager get more out of these existing players, or will he need new players?
My memories from that game are, I have nightmares that we went into that game with all the aforementioned reasons as to go and make it a game. And Aberdeen were, they were absolutely brilliant that night. They were, and I think the majority of players were like rabbits stuck in headlights, and they were winning every 50-50. They were winning every second ball, every third ball. They reminded, I think I said on the pod at the time, they reminded me of Walter Smith side against Aberdeen. Just that sort of gritty, roll the sleeves up type performance. And as you say, they had a great start to the season, so they were absolutely fine. The manager had obviously, got X, Y, and Z wrong, but the players on the park did nothing. As I said, we lack, like Scott said, we lack height, we lack power, we lack pace, but we lack that, that edge at the moment. And a manager can come in and do things with players and stuff, but the players, again, I'm going to feel like a broken record, but these players aren't designed to play in Scotland, they're designed to play in Europe. That's why we're so good in Europe, and that's why we're so poor domestically. Players that were signed, that I know it's not the same players since Gerrard was here, but if you look, there's it's a domino effect. When Gerrard won 55, and then if you remember that season after being Celtic, teams started that. You remember teams actually started to line up against us and learn how to play against us. So I remember we played Hibs at Ibrox, and I think we just beat them or drew or something. I think Portis got sent off one of the games that did get sent off, and I was just papering over the cracks. So Gerrard left. Van Bronckhorst comes in, new manager bounce, gets the Europa League final, but gets sacked for the same reasons as he is the same European style of football. Michael Beale comes in, does his Arnold Clark bit, and is against tries to play this European style of football. It doesn't work. So Clement, exactly the same European style of football. So the players that were getting in are designed to play in Europe. I've been banging the drum for long enough to get players that can play in our league, that can win in our league. There's players I remember watching last season. The boy Devlin in the middle of the park for Hearts, he was absolutely amazing against us. And I'm like, that's what we need in the middle. We need somebody like that. And folk go, it's Devlin, he's crap, all the rest of it. But, I would take 11 of them in the team rather than the posers for the Europa League nights. So, that's kind of where I'm at with that. What else did you ask me again? Kind of in a wee tangent there.
No, you covered everything. Mitch, on Dino's point there, he talks about obviously the difference between our European performances and our domestic performances, and that's been a well-worn sort of bone of contention. But then you can also just compare our domestic in terms of our home and away, because Clement really has a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde seemingly persona when it comes to our home games versus away games. We play better at home. We're obviously much more comfortable. A lot of which is to be expected. But then they're just so woeful away. And while you can come up with easy aspects as to why that is, because you've got the crowd behind you and you're comfortable at home, etc., you're still ultimately playing the same teams. So I would expect the gap to be smaller. But there's times where we play one team at home and then play them away, and it's like it's a totally different team that's come out to play these matches. What's your thoughts on less the difference between Europe and domestic, but between just home and away?
I've said this all season. We are the most bipolar team I've ever come across. We are so skittish at everything. Like, the first sign, half the time when you go, and I get going to places like Dundee on a winter's night, it's no fantastic. It's their version of going to Stoke on a winter's night, but they're the nights, they're the bread and butter nights. We should be going to places like Dundee, belting 3 or 4 past them, padding up the goal difference. So in the unlikely event we get to a goal difference deciding a title, it's nice and healthy when we get there. There's also only so much the manager can do. He sets the team up to do what they're supposed to do, but if the players don't go out there and follow through with what they're meant to do, and I'm sorry, but when the average player in our team is earning over, let's call it over 15 grand a week, versus Dundee players who are earning, let's say, on average, say 3 to 4 grand a week tops. You want to start talking, start padding and comparing finances. The team with their average wage bill of 15 grand a week should be drowning the team that's on 3 4 grand a week, but we don't, because professional players, like Ryan's just said, professional players act in an unprofessional way. And I actually think, in one hand, it's maybe not so much a Clement issue, and I dare sound like I'm bloody happy clapping over here, but I actually think it's in the dressing room itself. People love to glorify the 55 season. It's gone, it's happened. What the hell have we done since? Zip all. We've twiddled our pubes pretty much for a few years and went, that's great. As we say, we knocked back good money for Alfie, we knocked back money for players like Kent. We did nothing, because Gerrard was just as guilty of overpaying the players and signing off and saying, let's give them this contract, and that, which makes them so bloody unattractive to the market. Because why would you leave the team that's paying you 30 grand a week to go and play in Turkey for 30 grand a week? Why would you go and do it? You wouldn't. You can stay here, be nice and cosy, and alright, sometimes us fans give you a bit of aggro. But for 30 grand a week, you'll take the aggro. Because if you go elsewhere, you're not getting that 30 grand a week. So yeah, you'll go up to a higher level, but do you have the balls to take your career on, or do you not? And that's where you have to take that realisation of where Scottish football sits in the world's football market. We are the stepping stone. It all goes back to being that stepping stone. And if you've not come with that right mentality, then sorry, grab your kit bag and get away up the road, because I'm no interested in seeing you. If you don't have ambitions to take your career past the SPFL, away up the road with you. If you want to be a career SPFL man, go and join St Mirren. But yes, I'm off on a bit of an old man rant there. But to bring the train back onto the tracks for a minute, about the difference between playing away from home and at home. Genuinely, our players seem to be, the minute something goes wrong away from home, they do one of two things. They curl up inside themselves and go into the fetal position and lie on the floor and hope for the best that someday the big bad bully will run away. Or they get a spark put up their backside by, I don't know, if Zeus comes down and shoves a bolt of lightning up them and then makes them suddenly start playing football again. But they try to do it in a 15-20 minute burst to undo an hour's worth of bad work. That comes down to players, that's not necessarily management. But also then it goes back to the transfer issue, because you then look at the bench as it currently sits right now, and you go, what, are we going to chuck on 19-year-old Paul Enzio? Or are we going to chuck on Finlay Curtis, who's played, combined between the two of them, have played less than 12 games, and suddenly expect them to go in there and go and be the difference maker? That's not questioning these players' bottles, because as we know, I am very pro-youth. There is a way to break them in, and there's a way not to break them in. And right now, we sit currently on a knife edge of doing it either spectacularly well or absolutely honking. There is not going to be an in-between right now. But under the whole profit and sustainability argument, these homegrown academy players are pure profit when they move on, and they should want to move on within the next 2 to 3 years for their careers, whether that be the Championship, the Premier League, to Germany, or they might want to join Dino, going to Turkey for one of those nice hair transplants or something. Like, you know, they might want to be going doing something like that. But these players should be wanting to come down here, strap themselves in, and move themselves on to the next better league, whether that be a Holland or an England or somewhere else. England's not the be-all and end-all. But, yeah, when it comes to the manager's been left with tuppence halfpenny and players that are held together by hopes and prayers with hamstrings made of cheese strings, you know, there's not much that you can really do at that point.
Okay, and if I come to you, Scott, on the same kind of point, touching on our the last sort of game that we've highlighted, Mitch asked in the chat what game was the kind of tipping point for people, and Ryan's highlighted the next game that I've brought out here at the 1-1. Oh no, sorry, he said Dundee United. I've got 1-1 against Dundee, and so both the Dundees. And, you know, for me, this was a game. I picked this one more so than... So the game prior to this was the Hibernian 3-3 draw. And that came after the match where we actually finally walloped Celtic. And it felt very much like, you know, we took a giant leap forward. And then these two matches were our 2 steps back. And I could almost forgive them for the Hibs one. You know, they were a decent team. They were playing well. It was a high-scoring game. They'd obviously given a lot for the Old Firm, because I could almost forgive them for that. But then to not show the reaction in the game following, where they should have dusted themselves off, picked themselves back up and said, right, we need to get back to winning ways straight away, and to fail to do it again. This was when, for me, I really started to go down there, right? I don't see any hope here. We keep making these mistakes. And one of the issues is the player mentality. I do think that a lot of these things flow from the manager. People talk about Gerrard a lot, and he's coming up a lot now because he's free. He's a free agent again. And I do think one of the things that Gerrard got right was player mentality, particularly in Old Firm games. Players were really had the fire and the blood and thunder for those games, and it really came out of Gerrard as well. And you can see that in the difference in the players that were there after Gerrard, and the way I feel that mentality just seemed to slowly just eep away and disappear from the team the longer sort of Gerrard was away. Where do you kind of sit in terms of the balance of how much does it sit with the players to get themselves up for these games against your Dundees and your St Mirrens, the non-glamour ties? Because it's easy to get up. It's easy to get yourself pumped up to play Man United or Tottenham in Europe. But when it comes to getting yourself in the right headspace for your Dundees or your St Mirrens or whoever, where does that balance lie between the players themselves, and how much of that has to be coming from the manager? Because I feel like there's a lot of that flows from the manager. He sets the tone. He's the head coach. He should be setting the tone that then goes through, and he should be the ones that, when the players are not in the right headspace, gets them in the right headspace. And Clement doesn't seem to do that.
No, it does. I mean, listen, as a footballer, you should have that in yourself. Should be every game, every time you go to training, you should be given 110%. Have you seen it at other clubs? Players are the same. You should be given 110% through training in a match, going out to win that match. Every football player should be a winner. Should be a winning mentality, and the squad should be the same. But you know yourself, you don't like everybody you work with. So not all football players like each other, even in the same dressing room. But the manager has to have a lid on that. He has to know. He's got to set them up before they go into the park. Obviously, once they cross the line and on the park, he can't tell them what to do. He can shout instructions, but you don't have to listen to them. But that does come from the manager. At the end of the day, if we're not seeing it for the players, there's only one person going to pay, and it's going to be the manager. You can't sack footballers. We all wish you could at times, but you can't sack footballers on the contract, but you can pay a manager off. So, against Dundee, but if you watch that game back, Dundee are a poor side. I know they get a lot of plaudits by Tom and Dockett to set them up, but they're a very average SPL team. But when they play against us, they seem to break us open quite easily with just long balls, or they're running for Simon Murray, who just runs side to side, and he annoys your centre-backs and don't know how to, especially Popper. Popper has an issue dealing with somebody who is in his face, running about, whereas in European games, the game's played in front of him at times, so he can intercept. His awareness is really good. His stuff, but when somebody running next to him or somebody running behind him, he struggles because of pace, and that's for me comes back to the pace. In these games, but he needs some physicality. We've not got that. Raskin gives you a wee bit because that's the way he plays. Diamandi's not getting the physicality. Diamandi's he's a good player. Look, he's a clever player, but domestically, I think he lets us down a lot of times. So I think the squad's not built. I agree with you. The squad's not built for domestic football. But that's where Rangers have been for the past few seasons. They're built more for European football. But the manager's got to sit him out because it's great being up against, say we can do this against Celtic, get the plaudits and think, we won a game against them. That's great. But if he can't go in the next few days, and the next few games and beat Hibs or Dundee, there's really no point in beating Celtic. It's like Aberdeen 3 years ago, we turn up for us but get beat our next game. That's the kind of thing we're doing. So the squad has to be looked at, but most importantly, the manager has to be looked at. But the manager has to get him up and dress him, get him up in training. And I don't know if Clement's the best man manager. He's subbed somebody 15 times at half time this season. That's 15 times he's made a change at half time. That's a lot for a football manager. So as unless you're coaching it, come on, Mitch. I used to coach my son's team, and I know I made changes at half time unless it maybe under 9s or under 10s. But when they got older, you would let players play a wee bit longer unless somebody was too cold or went off. But as a professional manager, that's a lot of changes because you've been working most of the week to set your team up for this game, and then you go out and you feel like, shit, I made a mistake. And you get that, but it's the way he does it sometimes. He came in and he done it with Campbell, and we thought, we've got a manager here that's been players only pulling their weight or not listening to instruction. We take him out of the fire line, we take him off. And he took Campbell off for not listening to instructions and for constantly cutting inside by all accounts. I could be wrong. But then he brings in Cherny, who constantly cuts inside, and I'm happy with that. So it's kind of, what line do you want to be on here? Side of the line. So I don't know. The manager has to set him up for league games. Doesn't matter if you're playing St Mirren, Motherwell, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs or Celtic. It's 3 points at the end of the day. But domestically, we should be doing better than what we are. Listen, I know we're probably not going to win the league because over the piece, they are a better side. They've got better players than us. They've got a better squad than us. Like Mitch alluded to, some of our players need change because it's hard to get them because the contracts are on, and that's a club issue. That's not a manager issue. But we should still have better players. We've got better players in this league and players like other teams in the league because they're bringing in guys who are on free transfers, bringing in guys for Stockport in the conference when they're bringing in guys for League 2 in England. But they come up against us, they do really well because we allow them to do that. We sometimes, I said earlier, we set a tempo for the other side. We don't set a tempo for Rangers. We never start a game and go right in somebody's face. It's too slow. That's how Queen's Park went on Sunday. We were too slow and turgid. It was side to side, cross, ball into the box. We've not got the biggest guys in order to head of the ball. And Baylor Rice got a lot of stick. Maybe that's how he went off. To be honest with you, Baylor Rice on Sunday, I thought he was more like John Lundstrom. Because he was getting deeper and deeper and deeper and he was very slow. But that's not his fault. We try to get into the game. Because a lot of the time, we miss out in midfield the way we play. So, but the manager's got to get something right. Listen, he's been here 18 months. It could be longer. I'm just surmising. And for me, he still doesn't know his best formation or best 11. And that's worrying.
Are you going to come in there, Mitch? I saw you waving for a second.
There's a few points on that about hooking players at halftime. Not all of that has been tactical. Some of that has been because our players have mostly been kept together by thoughts and prayers. He's had to hook some of them off because medically they can only do 45 minutes and that's where they are, which is fine. Some of it has been that he's probably realised he's made an arse of it elsewhere and he's went, need to go and fix that, which again is what it is. That's also the sign of a strong manager to go, you and you aren't doing your job. I'm putting somebody else in to do your job for you for the next half. That's fine if it works. When we do it, we just kind of go, we're replacing 2 players that aren't doing that great, and the 2 players that are coming on will play well for 10 minutes, and then they'll get lazy like everyone else. The point that you made there about bringing in boys for like Stockport and places like that, the reason these boys do so well up here, they know that again, SPFL is their launch pad to something bigger if you do something big up here, doesn't matter if it's against either side of the divide or either of the Edinburgh teams, you do something up here, people will start to take notice. And that's when you get the move back down to, it might only be League One, or it might be the bottom tier of the Championship for them. But you'd be sure as hell that these boys are chasing money in their career, and they're chasing bigger desires to go and do well. Whereas I think the players that we've had previously, and the issues that we're trying to rectify, is we're not overpaying for players anymore. So that will mean that some of their feelings will get hurt when it comes to certain players going, whether that be, players on over 30 grand a week or players who want 30 grand a week. You want 30 grand a week, by all means, son, go and earn it, but you'll earn it the hard way by putting your boots on and doing your job. Because right now, none of you look like 30 grand a week players. And until such time that you want to become a 30 grand player, don't start coming asking me for 30 grand. But that's just me, and I think that comes down to a battle of balls, pretty much. How much do you want your career to kick on? Because if you're content just to sit there and take a paycheck, then sorry, go and take it somewhere else. Go and take it down Tesco if you want.
That'll be something. Get to see Tavernier stacking your shelf at Tesco. He'll get spooked by trolleys accidentally sneaking up on his left-hand side. Anyway, on that lovely little image, we've just hit the hour mark, so I'll bring things to a close there. I just want to say thank you to everyone in the comments who have been chatting away. Loads of great points being made there, loads of different points of view. Just leaves me to go through the guys and thank them for their contributions. So thanks, Scott, for joining us this evening.
My boy, Mitch. Mitch and Doug, thanks for having me on.
Mate.
Good to see you, Mitch, and good to see you, Dino.
And thanks, as always, to the handsome man of the pod, Dino.
Thanks for having me on, guys, and it was good to finally be on a pod. Be you, Scott.
See you next time, though, Dino. Go to brush your hair before you come on, because that's irritated me. You've had one wee bit poking out the whole time.
And thank you to Mitch for joining us as well. So just remains for me to just remind you again, we've got a pod out on potential replacements for Philip Clement. That's out on the Rangers Journal channel. Just look under videos, you'll see that there. It's a Cop and Report video on ones to watch. And you can also see that on the Heart and Hand Network, patreon.com/Heart and Hand. As that's one of the ones we're doing in conjunction with them. So if you do listen to the Heart and Hand guys, you can also find us there. So thanks for tuning in. We've got more stuff coming, pre and post match content for with the weekend's game, as well as Friday pod as well. And just coming in at the very end, my best pal. We barely even mention Tavernier Curry as well. You would have loved it. It was a practically Tavernier free zone, but alas, you've just missed us. You can restart the pod, Curry, don't worry. It's always there to be rewatched. So thanks everyone for watching, and just remember that every night is a Rangers Journal night. Thanks.